Hello, everyone, and welcome to our first episode of the Practical BI mini-series. I'm Yuste. I will be helping PS moderate the chat today because today we are diving into the top 5 Snowflake features that you need to know to elevate your analytics. So I'm super excited to be joined by Piers Batchelor, our senior
Everyone.
product manager at Astrato, and also a Snowflake data superhero. He's going to be walking us through his favorite Snowflake features today, maybe showing a little bit of demo in action and sharing his top tips and tricks that can be implemented right away. But before we get started, we have a few quick housekeeping items. So, first of all, if you have any questions throughout the session, don't hesitate to put them in the chat on LinkedIn, and we'll try to answer them as soon as we can. If we can't get to them during the live stream, we'll answer to you in the comments on LinkedIn. We would love to hear your favorite Snowflake features if you are on Snowflake. And if you are an Astrato user, please share your favorite Astrato features and tips and tricks. Also drop them down below in the chat. Finally, this session is being recorded. So if you need to step away from your laptop at any point or want to come back to this recording to rewatch some bits, the recording will be on our LinkedIn feed and on our YouTube channel. I think that's all for me. So let's get into the interesting stuff with PS.
Thanks, Eusta. This is exciting. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Piers Batchelor. I'm a senior product manager at Astrato Analytics. And as you can see by the image, I'm a Snowflake data superhero. So 3 years in a row, I've been a Snowflake data superhero. There's a few pictures of me there. Most of these are at Summit, actually. And one of those, I'm beamed on stage at Summit. And you can see the Snowflake founders, Benoit and Thierry as well, with some of us Snowflake data superheroes. So I'm a BI and data viz expert, and I spent the first part of my career as a BI developer, BI consultant, and I actually lead 2 Snowflake user groups, co-lead. So the London user group and the LGBTQIA plus user group. And here we go. To start off with, I'll be taking you through the journey to modern self-service BI, and that will segue into data apps. This is just to set the scene and talk about, thanks Martin, to talk about some of the Snowflake features that we'll be showing you today. So I want to touch on legacy BI first. Legacy BI comes with some of its challenges and how we leverage those features in Snowflake. So of course, when you're extracting data in using your legacy BI tools, we've put a few examples on screen. There are, of course, the coding skills required for those BI tools. You've got very specific expression language. And of course, if you're pulling data out of Snowflake, you're creating a silo. So in a way, you're almost as good as Excel. It's out of date, and you're causing decision lag, analytics lag. Things take longer to do, and you've got separate compute, so separate resources, and you have to manage security separately as well. You're doing it once in Snowflake, and you're doing it again in your BI tool. And of course, there's some challenges around actions and analytics. So are there ML capabilities? Most of the time there isn't. And can you add different actions onto your analytics? Usually not. And that's where data apps come in as well. And of course, it does take a little bit longer to get to grips. I touched on the unique expression languages for various tools. And if you're a new user or you're new to one of these BI tools and you're trying to upskill, it's going to take you significantly longer, especially if you're already familiar with Snowflake. So that learning curve is a little bit steeper. And even when we compare to other modern BI tools, choosing the right BI tool is critically important, especially when it comes to Snowflake. So even some competing modern BI tools will not make the best use of Snowflake and will add compute where maybe not necessary. You can see on the left, we've got competing BI tool comparing it to how Astrato works. Very efficient, only querying what we need. And on the left-hand side, we have a competing tool that's materializing views, creating subsets of the data to, in some cases, we can debate about this in a separate webinar. You could be saying they're cutting corners there. Now, in the cloud, modern BI tools, self-service BI becomes much, much simpler. All of the governance and security and the compute and the storage is done right in Snowflake. Data doesn't need to leave Snowflake at all. And business users use self-service BI tools as the front end for Snowflake, the visual layer, and as we'll see, the execution layer. So of course, there's many modern self-service BI tools, and with Astrato, with a visual self-service BI tool, there are others that focus on the spreadsheet experience, others that focus on the search-led experience, and with the visual analytics experience and data apps. So as I had mentioned on the previous slide, visualization and execution layer on top of Snowflake. And you see this red ring right in front of us. We have dashboards, reporting, data exploration, alerts, write back, GenAI, powered by Snowflake Cortex. So all of these things come together. It's not just BI. It's not just read-only dashboards. It goes a little bit higher than that. So the core of what we do, of course, self-service BI. Taking it further, we enable customers to deliver data apps. Data apps bring multiple use cases together. So think of your traditional data products. Some will even say a view in Snowflake is a data product. I like to think of data products as things that your business users would make use of. Alerts, reports, BI dashboards, and data models, of course. And then you've got the operational products that sit wildly separate to your analytics. So CRM tools, ticketing systems, even your financial tools. Those are operational products where you're spending time doing work. So the analytics side, the data products, is the what happened and what should we do next, maybe why. And then the operational products, the tools, are let's do it, maybe a little bit of how we do it. These are separate. They don't sit in the same place, and usually they're involving other people. There is this sweet spot in the middle, this intersection, which we like to call data apps. Some people will call it decision apps, and due to the overlap, you can see in that Venn diagram up top, they're still part of the data apps ecosystem. So let's get to it. My top 5 features to leverage in BI and data apps. So my number 1 has to be Snowflake Cortex. And I guess one of the reasons why it's Snowflake Cortex is we've been using this a lot. You can see in this image in the middle, we've got AI-powered insights. I'll touch on that a little bit more later. But why in Snowflake Cortex? We have large language models running directly in Snowflake. So no data is moved, no data leaves Snowflake. It's entirely secure. I've never had any pain setting up anything in Snowflake Cortex. And even when I've wanted something a little bit more out of Snowflake Cortex, I have been able to add context and add knowledge to it by using custom models. So fine-tuned models, adding knowledge such as I'm in the UK, so here are the list of UK bank holidays. If there is no activity on a given date, here's the reason why. And adding that extra context is going to give you much better answers for questions asked by your business on those latest models that are available in Snowflake Cortex. And of course, I mentioned that it's secure from having zero data movement. But what's also quite amazing with Snowflake Cortex is everything is done within the warehouse. So you have the ability to pass over a SQL statement and not having to insert the snapshot of the data. I'm sure we've all been there where we've maybe played around with something like ChatGPT or Claude. We've exported maybe from a BI dashboard, maybe even from Excel, a CSV or an Excel file, uploaded it and asked it, can you give me a summary? You can do that directly on Cortex with just a SQL query. No need to export. So what are we doing differently? Large language models do struggle with text to SQL, generally speaking. And especially when you've got things like vague column names or duplicate column names. We've all seen that field that just says ID, and it says it in every single table. When you pass that along to a large language model, depending on the model and depending on how you ask the question, it's going to get confused very quickly. And then you've got to pass over maybe even an entire semantic model. That can be very difficult to generate those, especially if you don't have a user interface for it, and you have an expectation that the language model should understand you, and you can't always pass all of that context that's needed over to the language model. So our own semantic layer talks to Snowflake Cortex, where we're suggesting, not guessing, how a question should be answered, and we're adding the extra context in there for you as well. So all live on SQL data, no exports, no transfer of data, just SQL queries. And here's a little bit about how it works. So we have a prompt, we have Snowflake SQL, and no data transferred. And we have our semantic layer. So all of the tables, relationships, metrics, definitions are all passed through. And they're passed through when you're interacting with our Insights Analyst agent or our BI Copilot agent. So whether you're generating a title for a visualization, we want to add real meaning to that, or whether you're summarizing data, we want to make sure that is customized and personalized based on who's asking the question. And one thing to add here that's very important for governance, because the LLM sits in Snowflake, you don't need to worry about governance and security because it's already built in. So your row level security, your role-based access control is already respected. So there's no need to set up security again and again. It's security done right once. It's the way we like it. So that's my first one. I've added a bonus in here as well. It's still part of the Cortex suite. I've focused on Cortex LLM. Cortex AI-SQL is definitely something you should check out if you haven't used it before. So in this example here, in this dashboard, I've got my sentiment scores, my sentiment results. Is it negative, neutral, positive? And it's my HR use case. So what's the employee feedback been? And I can simply ask for sentiment on the whole body of text. But there is a preview feature from Snowflake called Entity Sentiment. You'll see the code on the left-hand side. And this is pretty cool because I can now categorize multiple scores, multiple categories in a single request. So I can say, give me a score for team working, timekeeping, work ethic, and we'll get a response back. Sometimes it's unknown. Maybe the category isn't mentioned at all. But what's helping me here is that I can understand what drivers of the overall sentiment there are. So is the work ethic so positive that the overall sentiment is positive? Is that the key driver behind the sentiment? And that's giving me a little bit more understanding of the why, something that we can really deliver to the business, because that's what we're doing as data professionals, is making people's day-to-day easier through the use of data. And entity sentiment can play a big part in this if you've got any text-based data, reviews, feedback, etc. So I've talked a lot about Snowflake Cortex now. You can try some of these demos in our gallery. And I'll move my mouse over. Yeah, the QR code's on screen. And I think my little frame is not in the way. Yeah, there it is for now. So my number 2 feature, Snowpark. For me, this when I started using Snowflake, it changed a lot of the analysis that I was doing and the way that I built out BI and data apps dashboards, because users demand that dashboards and data apps generate insights instantly. Some of those insights come from code or processes that sits outside of SQL. So Python, Java, Scala, all of the languages that Snowpark offers. So no more waiting for nightly loads, generating risk scores as we see in the example, as I filter down and I get new risk scores around the scatter chart. Previously, before Snowpark, that wasn't possible to have that instantly. So teams would be waiting overnight, and now they've got up to the minute, up to the second data, and the insights demand that too. So they can use data to tackle rising issues straight away, acting quickly. So we're interacting with Snowpark through calling user-defined functions as measures in visualizations, or even triggering Snowpark functions as part of stored procedures. For example, maybe summarizing, categorizing feedback from a data app. Maybe you entered something into a form in a dashboard and we're writing it back to Snowflake. We want to summarize that. That's a small use case there. Of course, we've got the risk example there, and you'll see some more later. Now, clustering, that's my number 3. I've got the code up top this time. Clustering is enabling much, much faster queries. This is something where, as you scale your data, as you build out your use case, you don't have to worry about your dashboard being slow. That's where we're really, really shifting away from legacy BI. We're now looking at data that is in the billions and trillions. So your BI tool, you should expect your BI tool to be as fast as Snowflake. And if you're not clustering, the good news is you can make Snowflake faster. Faster queries, and that's thanks to the micro partitions. We can prune them and we're only hitting relevant data. So we already know which pockets of data to pull, making the queries much faster and making sure those large queries and all of that compute, all of that thinking can fit in an even much smaller warehouse. So that can help you reduce the cost of day-to-day BI questions, analytics in Snowflake. And concurrency is a big deal here as well. If you have hundreds of users hitting the same data, the better you cluster your data, those smaller partitions, if they're pocketed together, you can have different users making sure they're only taking the bits that they need directly from Snowflake, no more. And the scalable performance is huge here. So you're scaling to billions of trillions, billions or trillions of rows, and you don't have to worry about that performance. As you add more and more data, the clusters will increase. So if we're clustering, you see up top, if we're clustering by month, of course, I'm adding months over time. I'm adding more data. Those clusters will continue to grow, and the performance will, as long as I don't widen my data, add more columns, the performance, you should expect it to be relatively the same under a normal use case. And I'd say last of all on here, the governance. Clustering works with security policies, so there's nothing to worry about there. That is security done right once. It just works. So hopefully we're all ready for my number 4, which isn't necessarily a Snowflake-centric feature, but for BI and data apps, write back is an essential part of data apps. Going from a simple BI dashboard where you've got your visualizations, KPIs, and maybe you're looking at profit and loss, the ability to read and write is that next level in data products. Having that bidirectional relationship with your data. So maybe I want to tweak my budgets on the fly. So I can click on edit on this dashboard and update budgets and have approval workflows. So finance teams want to adjust targets right in the dashboard, and they don't want a separate form. They don't want a separate tool to log into. It's very complicated, the separation of analytics tools and operational tools. Or maybe you want the sales pipeline to be updated. Deal stages, benchmarking, things like that. Or maybe from an operations perspective, you've got supply chain shifts and you need to know, oh, this is the date that I'm going to reorder something, reorder inventory. So all of these things can be done from a dashboard or from a data app. Customer feedback loops, what if scenario testing, very common use cases. And it means I don't need to switch context, change tools, or have that Chrome tab fatigue that we all know about. And that is a really, really nice segue over to external functions. I think these go hand in hand. Maybe I'm biased. Let me know in the comments. So the approval workflows I talked about on the last slide. I'll quickly go back to that. The approvals here, maybe I'm editing a budget and I want to have that approved by a colleague or by my manager. For an approval workflow to work effectively, yes, I can do that exclusively using writeback. But what if I need another tool? What if I need a customer to sign something? Maybe I can have a call outside of Snowflake to DocuSign. That's the type of thing that the external functions in Snowflake enable. An external function sits as part of Snowpark, and it can communicate over the internet. Of course, you enable that over the internet. I'll touch on that in the demo. And you can communicate with things like DocuSign, or if you're in CRM, you can update HubSpot or Salesforce, keeping your pipeline in sync. For inventory forecast, you can connect to your planning tools, scheduling tools, data quality, scenario costing, all of that. You can connect Snowflake to your tools, and you can have your data app interface with Snowflake, being that single source of truth to make sure that a single job, a single task can be done on one screen in a data app. And there's no time like the present. Why don't we show you that now? Just changing tabs over with my Snowflake mug. All right, you can all see my screen. So in this example, I'll get you up to speed of where we are. If you imagine that I'm an account manager and I'm responsible for looking after the subscriptions within this business. We're using a couple of tools. We're using HubSpot, and we've got all of our analytics central in Snowflake, including some stuff from HubSpot. So we've got our single source of the truth as Snowflake, our data warehouse. We're using Snowpark, we're using Cortex, we're using everything under the sun in Snowflake. Now, I have a bit of a challenge where I've got these various customers with high risk of churn, and I know, okay, well, they've got some support cases. That might be a reason that they want to reduce churn, and they've got a few feature requests that are outstanding. But I know today, excuse me, I'll close my door. I know today that to reduce churn risk as soon as possible, one thing that I have control over is the subscription value. So maybe I want to pick on one of these account managers. So happen to have our CEO in here, Martin Mahler, and one of his customers, customer 4077, I can pick them out from the table and I see, okay, subscription value 1,700, churn risk of 28%. So that's okay. Maybe I'll pick 4081 from the table. That's definitely one that needs attention. 58% risk of churn. 2 support cases, no feature requests. So already I can say to Martin, right, maybe this customer should be at $8,000 subscription. And of course I could build in an approval workflow here. But what we're going to do now is we'll calculate that risk. Normally, I would have to wait for a data scientist. I'd have to raise a ticket. I'd have to wait for the model to run for that updated churn risk. And I have it on screen thanks to Snowpark. A Python script in the background, it knows when I've written back to Snowflake. So I've written back, I've done my analysis, and I've got my result. So I've got my result that helps me make my decision. So I have a 44% risk of churn now. I think we can take that a little bit further. Maybe we want to do a little bit of what if analysis and say, well, what if we did 7,500? We'll calculate the risk here. And 44%. You'll see up top, I've added a lovely user message that says updating HubSpot, and HubSpot will open. And here it is. That's what my external function was doing. I'll talk you through how that worked in a second. And you can see that here we've got 4081 in the membership notes. The subscription's updated, and the reason was poor customer support. We did have 2 support tickets and high subscription costs. So we've automatically updated HubSpot directly from Astrato, and we have the AI summarized reason thanks to Snowflake Cortex in there as well. And if I wasn't using a data app, how many tools would I have used for this? I've done my analytics. That's one tool. I've done my write back. That would be another tool as well. I've managed to use Snowpark. That probably would have been a separate tool as well. AI, you'd probably be using ChatGPT today if you weren't using Snowflake. And I've updated HubSpot. That's 5 tools in one screen. I'll show you a little bit about how I've achieved that. Simple first step, write back. This is using Astrato Actions. I've selected the table. I've updated only 3 fields, and then I refresh the data so I can see the results on screen. Snowpark's doing all the magic in the background. It already knows I've written back. So when we refresh the data, we get that new result. And then You're probably wondering, how did I do that external function in HubSpot? Just a few steps here. I build the URL to open the link. I already know the link to my HubSpot workspace. I just pull the customer ID. Very simple. I put a lovely message to inform the users what's happening. HubSpot's going to automatically open. And then very, very simple, we call a stored procedure using an Astrato action. With just 3 parameters, we say, here's the contact I want to update. Here's the field name that I want to update. And here's the field content. Just 3 instructions. And at the end, we open HubSpot and we show the user that's updated that. We show Martin, the account manager, here's the customer, and here's what's updated. Martin's free to add any other notes, email the customer, SMS, call them. And it's over to the CRM. So we've fully integrated a whole workflow into just one screen. And that is how we're taking BI to data apps using Snowflake. I think I've touched on my top 5 features here in this particular app alone. So yeah, there's a lot going on. Let me know in the comments what you think, and yeah, I'd love to get a little bit of feedback from you all on what you've seen today. Justo, do we have any questions from the audience for now? Oh, I can't hear you. It could be me.
Yes, sorry, I was muted.
There we go.
Awesome presentation. Just a few minutes over, but you managed to pack so much into it. So well done. We don't have any burning questions at this point, but I'm sure people will have questions once they watch the live stream to the very end on